Everything okay? Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our third session of this series in association with Mahindra Insurance Brokers Limited. Today's topic is rather relevant and something which we don't speak about as much as we all should. Let's look at terrorism, and let's not forget that this did not start with the attack on the World Trade Center. I mean, of course, that was a monumental event which has happened and has become a part of our history, but that's not where the roots are stemming from. But it sure, the 9/11 attack paved a new landscape of what we know of the concept. Um, you know, in a broader sense, global terrorism is on the rise, and without a shadow of doubt, has claimed thousands of corporate lives across the world. Gone are the days when terrorism only, had a religious angle or a fundamental angle. Globalization and the way the world is changing has obviously had a major impact on the rules of the game, of the landscape of terrorism, both for terrorists and for firms. What we need today is a well organized response which has effective policies, equipped resources, and clear communications over and above the usual corporate security. Now, an attack on a business can be carried out to, it can have different motives. It can either be assigned to show strength, it could be done to harass, or it could simply be a wealth acquisition activity. And businesses have proven to be a tempting target, soft target for terror groups, because an attack of this nature can lead to property destruction, extortion, ransom, theft, sabotage, and so many other things. An attack on the firm cannot, just does not cause physical damage and loss of human resources, but it also damages the knowledge base of the company and destroys the reputation that it enjoys with its internal and external stakeholders. The idea behind going after corporations is obviously to reduce the total capital stock of the society and overall loss in worldwide trade. And if you've noticed, corporate managements have started to realize that the transfer of accountability to, say, law enforcement agencies is not the only solution. Now, in the Western world, the situation is far grimmer, as there have been instances where firms have had to, nationalize assets to free an executive. And given the, growing volatility over the world, it is imperative and very important for companies today to have a crisis management response system, which not only has trained professionals heading the initiative, but also have a certain experience in handling such scenarios. The success of efforts, largely depends upon the ability to deny these terror groups their customary advantage, which relies on surprise. So I'm very, very pleased to have, Rajnish, who's a practice leader with Mahindra Insurance Brokers Limited. And just to give you a quick background, Mahindra Insurance Brokers Limited is one of the few insurance broking companies in India to have been awarded the prestigious ISO certification for quality management standards and systems. Uh, the company provides direct insurance broking for corporate and retail customers and offers, a range of products for the non-life and life segments. And in addition, Mahindra Insurance also offers value-added services like risk management, audit, all of which, of course, our moderator and keynoter Rajnish will talk more about in his opening keynote, which talks about the new world, new threats, and new risk challenges. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Rajnish Kumar, who's leading the practice for property and engineering with Mahindra Insurance Brokers Limited. Rajnish, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Shantanu, for that quick introduction and setting the tone. Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Mahindra Insurance Brokers Limited, I welcome you all to the webinar Managing Crisis and Rethinking Security in the New World Order. Now, when we talk about crisis or when we even think about crisis, what comes to our mind is that it is an event which has basically three characteristics. Number one, it is an event which is unexpected and sudden. Number two, it is an event which can be disruptive to our businesses. Number three, it can harm the organization as well as the stakeholders. Now, in the current era, when we think about such event, what comes to our mind is n number of events, which can create a crisis in our businesses. Few of them is a cyber attack, a kidnap and ransom of key people, or a terrorist attack. All these events can lead to crisis and disrupt our businesses. In this webinar, we would be focusing mainly on terrorism because there's a paucity of time. So our central discussion will be around terrorism only. Now, when we talk about terrorism, as Shantanu was referring, there are multiple definitions of terrorism available everywhere. But if we have to keep it very short and understand what terrorism is, so terrorism in its broadest sense, it is the use of violence and fear to achieve an ideological aim. So you have an ideological aim, you use violence and fear to achieve it. Now, talking about the history of terrorism, the words terrorist and terrorism, they originated during the French Revolution. That was way back in the 18th century. But it became widely used internationally and it gained worldwide attention in the 1970s during the Northern Ireland conflict and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. In the 1980s, the suicide attacks increased across the globe, and we know what happened. 9/11 happened, and then the complete scenario at the global stage was changed. It changed the way the world looked at managing terrorism as a risk. The total losses for 9/11 is estimated to be in the range of USD 10 billion. This was the loss that the reinsurers and insurers have to bear that time. Now, talking about India, 26/11, an event which changed the way people in India started looking at terrorism. It is estimated that insurance claims of more than rupees 376 crore was settled after the Mumbai attacks in 2008. The fund that covered most of the claims was from the Indian Market Terrorism Pool. Now, this terrorism pool was set up way back in 2002, and all the members contribute 100% of the terrorism premium to this corpus, which is shared between all the pool members when there is a claim to settle those claims. Again, talking about terrorism, when we see the global figures, if we refer to the Global Terrorism Database, which is maintained by the University of Maryland College Park, we have more than 61,000 incidents of non-state terrorism, which resulted in at least 1.4 lakhs deaths between 2000 and 2014. This data itself speaks about the kind of intensity terrorism can bring, the kind of destruction that terrorism can bring. Talking about terrorism insurance in India, again, terrorism insurance in India is not a mandatory cover. It usually comes as an add-on peril under the property insurance, and it is optional to the insured. When we talk about the buying behavior of corporates when it comes to terrorism risk, most of the board members and the management are unaware of the level of terror risk which can be faced by their companies. Even after buying terrorism policies for their properties and possible business disruptions, companies may be clueless about how the death and devastation from a terror attack could impact their balance sheets. Now, we have a set of corporates who are buying terrorism risk upfront to the full limits. Then we have a set of corporates who are buying insurance coverage for terrorism, but again with certain cappings. And then we have a set of corporates who at all are not buying any kind of terrorism policies in India. especially companies, where we have a high level of physical interactions with customers, like hospitality industry or a travel industry. These companies may end up being slapped with claims from their clients when and if there is a terrorism activity around. Now, when we talk about the capacities of terrorism in India, General Insurance Corporation of India, more popularly known as GIC, leads the race with more than 3.3 billion INR capacity, which is followed by New India, United, Oriental, and National Insurance. We also have a lot of private players like Bajaj, ICICI Lombard, Reliance. All of them are providing some kind of capacities. Again, in India, a lot of capacity is being pulled up from the international market. So this was a short brief on terrorism, and we will move into the panel discussion to see the various implication of terrorism, the various aspects of terrorism. So over to you, Shantanu, for the panel discussion round. Shantanu?
Yes, I'm with you, Rajnish. I think we should thank you for that opening session. We would now go backstage and get the rest of the panelists and be right back with our audience. Meanwhile, ladies and gentlemen, there is a chat icon on your systems. You can post your questions, and I'd be happy to deliver those to our speakers and moderators. Please stay logged in. We should be back in the next 60 seconds with our panelists. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. I apologize, it was a minute later than we had actually anticipated, but I'm very happy to now announce our next session, which is going to talk about integrating crisis management with business continuity. Rajnish, the practice leader with property and engineering from Mahindra Insurance Brokers Limited, will be moderating this session. I have Mr. Abhishek Bansal, the Chief Risk Officer and CISO with Max Life Insurance Company. Along with him, giving him company is Nimesh, who's the Chief Risk Officer with Edelweiss General Insurance Company Limited. We have a couple of more speakers likely to join us in the next 30 seconds, but in the interest of time, I would request Rajnish to begin the session and the Q&A. Over to you, Rajnish.
Thank you, Shantanu. First and foremost, I welcome all the panelists on board, and very good afternoon to all the participants. To begin with, just to set the tone right, like in my opening keynotes, I mentioned about terrorism as one of the key perils, key risks that most of the corporates have been looking at in the current era. So, keeping the same view in mind, I'd like to take Abhishek Bansal's opinion on how crisis management has taken the front seat in the enterprises, especially in the last few years, and how do you see this? So,
Sure.
Abhishek, over to you.
So thank you, Rajnish, and thank you, the Programming Asia, to allowing me to be part of this panel. Really elated to be part of this esteemed panel. So Rajnish, I was actually part of your keynote. Was keenly listening to you about the different trends you kind of talked about. But the question actually posed is a little bit broad, and I think all of us here and people who are kind of watching us talk live, last few years have been years of turmoil. Especially if we see last 2 years, I think a lot has been taught via pandemic, right? Global world over. If we see last few months and what is continuing in almost over 70 plus countries in some African and South American continents, food crisis is another thing. But I think what we really want to center and focus about is the kind of attacks we talked about, in this volatile, uncertain, complex world, about cyber attack, kidnapping, and ransom, and terrorism. So I think terrorism today is taking multiple facets, whether we take or see the physical form of it, right? If I can kind of correlate some of the examples which have happened in India, right from 2019 Pulwama, or 16 Pathankot, Bangalore, Chennai in 14, or even the Taj attacks in Mumbai, right? And the list can go on and on. There is a separate league which is also coming up, and there are series of attacks which keep on happening in JNK, which takes a toll of human life. There is another dimension which is also springing up big time, where the companies have to really manage crisis, is also around the logical form of it, which is the cyber terrorism, cyber warfare, or the cyber attacks, right? And one can actually see multiple manifestations of this, right from a simple unstructured attack, where somebody can take a command and control, to complex coordinated attacks. Now, this is again not very new, and the history goes back to the biggest form of terrorism, when in 2007, the most digitized country in the world, Estonia, was taken aback with what is called as one of the nightmarish cyber attacks, or the cyber terrorism which has happened in there. So I believe, I think this conference is structured in the right way. All the organizations, enterprises, and even individuals need to really see how they manage this crisis, whether it is in the personal capacity or in the enterprise capacity, and how they really take way, in terms of the risk hedge, different instruments, whether it is insurance or right precautions which have to be taken in terms of the control structure, whether it is a logical controls which they need to deploy in their enterprises, or the right amount of, let's say, for example, risk hedge strategies when it comes to the larger form of terrorism and other form of crisis which everybody is grappling with around.
Great. So, let me ask Nimesh. Nimesh, can you throw some light on the history of terrorism, the various causes, the motivation beyond the terrorist activity?
Sure. Thanks, Rajnish. First of all, thank you so much for picking up this concept which we're discussing, which is, I think, of interest to the entire world, not just here, but the entire world. And thanks, Abhishek, for setting the context for this discussion. Now, if we look at the history of terrorism, let's look at first the concept of terrorism, right? When we talk about terrorism, we're talking about disruption, right? And when we talk about disruptions, we can think of two kinds of disruptions on high level. One is the nature made, and the other one is man made. And if we talk about terrorism, I think this can top the list as far as the man made disruptions are concerned. Now, looking at the history, for example, if we talk about the history, I believe basis whatever limited studies that I've done on this topic, or whatever I read in the past, it can date back as ever since the mankind evolved, right? So we have seen instances of disruptions of this kind of nature even in the old ages, old civilizations. I mean, this concept is not something what we are discussing today, or it's not a new concept. It's been going on since ages. It can date back to thousands of years back. Of course, as far as the term terrorism is coined, it got more popular as a term after the French Revolution, sometime in the later part of the 18th century. But as a concept, I think this has been existing since ages. I mean, it's not a new concept which we are facing today. You talk about the old kings who were ruling the kingdoms. They were not aloof from all the terrorist attacks that they had done. In fact, if we look at the older civilizations, the way the forts were built, I think they were all built in a manner to prevent any kind of attacks from the enemies or any kind of terrorist attacks, right? So, Indian civilization also has a lot of examples in terms of the terrorist attacks which has happened in the past. And I think in the last few years, in the current decade, in the previous decade, I think all of us have been privy to the instances of 9/11 which happened, or 26/11 which happened in Mumbai, right? So I think as far as history is concerned, it is not a new concept, but which has been going on since ages. Now, coming to the causes and the motivation factors, what leads to this kind of terrorism, right? If I were to think about it, let's think of it from an individual perspective, right? If I think of an individual who is indulging into some kind of a terrorist activities, right? Now, what could be the causes, or what could be the motivating factor that leads to an individual in terms of indulging into terrorist attacks? So, first and foremost, let's pick up the psychological aspect, right? The psychology of an individual, right, which can lead to this kind of phenomena. So, if I were to talk about an individual, I think psychologists all over the world, after the terrorist attacks happen, they have been trying to study the psychology of people in terms of why people do certain things, what they are doing, right? And it's hard to find answers for them as well. But what particularly transpires is that some episode which could have happened in the past, which leads them to indulging into this kind of activities leading to terrorism and causing mass destruction for that matter. So a simple word could be revenge. They're trying to take revenge by causing harm to some other persons who are not even involved with that activity. So it could be as crazy as that, because the persons who are harmed in the episode have not done any harm to them. But still, these kind of episodes do happen. Second, let's talk about the ideology which leads to these kind of attacks. So when I talk about ideology, it's kind of a group behavior. So it could be a group behavior leading to this kind of an activity. So some people who are leading a common purpose, or who are driving a common purpose, which is not in the benefit of mankind, but which they think is leading to, by doing such episodes, they can draw attention, or they can possibly create an impact, or they can drive attention of the government for asking for certain demands. It could be those ideology factor. uh, Last but not the least, I can even cite some strategic aspects which may lead to these kind of disruptions happening, what we see all around. So when I say strategy, it could be, it's very sad but true, that it could be on the strategy maps of some countries as well, to cause disruptions in other countries. So there could be groups within groups, or pockets within a country, for some motive which they have in mind, causing disruptions. I think broadly, at individual level, at a group level, at a high level, I think these could be the key causes and the motivation which could be driving people into these crazy ideas. I think ultimately leading to a very big stigma on the entire things that they're doing.
So rightly mentioned, Nimesh, ideological goals, ideological mindsets are one of the key reasons, why we see terrorism on a rise. Now, when we talk about terrorism, most of us remember, 9/11, or we remember, 26/11 when it comes to India.
Correct.
But I'm
Yeah,
sure, as I was mentioning in my, initial dialogue, that, there has been more than 61,000 instances of terrorism from
absolutely.
2000 to 2014. So would you help
Absolutely.
us, to get a global picture of, like, how terrorism is perceived as a risk globally?
Yeah. So, if we were to talk about the risk from a global perspective, I think every country, whether it is small or a big country, whether we are talking about the nations from the west, or whether talking about the nations in the east, a developed country, underdeveloped country, I think this is on the top of the agenda list across the globe. I mean, no country is aloof from not paying attention to this kind of episodes which keep happening. So I think on the this has a very big impact from a global perspective. I think billions of dollars we are spending as a world. We are spending billions of dollars in terms of for preventing terrorism attacks happening. Right. So that's the kind of space it occupies in our lives. And if we were to talk about from a national security perspective, I think a large amount, which could be otherwise used for the benefit of mankind, is otherwise going into preventing terrorist attacks. I think that's a very sad story. Of course, national security comes foremost. We can't compromise on that. But due to some thought processes of individuals or groups, I think no country is aloof in terms of paying attention to this terrorism, which is on the top of the agenda. And talking about this kind of global episodes, recently this episode happened to our own family. So my son has recently gone to US for pursuing his further studies, and he has been there less than a month in the campus. And just about a week back, there was an episode which happened in his own campus, where someone had placed a bomb in the parcel which was being delivered, which landed into a mailing room. The guy opened it, and it busted went, right. So that's the kind of threat all of us are living in today. And there was another bomb which was diffused and possibly averted any further damage happening, right. So that's the kind of uncertainty that we are in from a global perspective. Talking about from a corporate perspective also, we talk about companies in any part of the globe. I think everyone has got this kind of a risk which is there on the top of their agenda. Name a country, and every company in any country would today have a kind of structure which is built in. So, for example, if we talk about the business continuity planning that we do, right, these kind of threats which come up, companies are today geared up to face any kind of events which could happen as a result of terrorist attacks, right. we wouldn't be talking about business continuity on account of terrorism possibly 50 years back as serious we are today. We also talk about this AML and terrorist financing laws which are there. So I think it's practically all over the globe, be it at a national level, be it at a corporate level, be it at a family level. Like I just cited the episode, I think this type of a threat is always there on the top of the mind somewhere. You do not know what the next moment has in store for us. So that's the kind of uncertainty all of us are in today. So let's hope for better times in the coming times. Let's see.
Thank you, Nimesh. That was really insightful.
Thanks, Rajnish. Yeah.
Let me reach out to Shailendra. Shailendra, your thought process on terrorism as a global risk. How do you see it?
Uh, so, see, there was a world before 26/11 and there's a world after 26/11, right? And we have seen now terrorism in various shapes and forms. Uh, Someone's terrorist could be someone's freedom fighter. So there is a valid, invalid justification also around terrorism. People really believe in the cause. It could be religious, it could be economic, it could be covert, it could be overt, it could be in many shapes and sizes. And I think we will see some dip. Then again, we see some different form of terrorism taking shape. So, for example, in India, touch wood, luckily, we haven't seen any terrorism or security related incidents in the recent times. But we have seen a lot of cells getting busted, especially around the 15th August, 26th January, or the festival season times. So, this is an example of India. Similarly, there are examples across the globe where we see lone wolf attacks happening. So now, instead of a larger group, now we are having sleeper cells who can get digitally. You can get into their minds and you can create lone wolves attacks. So you don't need to cross the border to get a training, but you could train someone who could be as simple as using a knife or doing something in the mailroom, as Nimesh mentioned. So it's taking various shapes and sizes, and I don't know how it will shape up. But if you look at the top global risk reports of, say, control risk or any of the good publications, geopolitical risk, economic risk related to countries, terrorism risk are at the top. And if you see, there's a thin line or there's a great connect interlinkages between all of these. So you could have a Ukraine and a Russia war happening directly, but you would have a lot of cyber terrorism happening before the whole war unfolded. I think we would be aware that the war was first fought in the cyber skies,
Absolutely.
and then it went into an actual full scale war. So, and corporates, the best way to hit a country is either its national resources, which could be the electricity grid or something, or you could hit the top corporates. So, I think it will take various shapes and sizes. The terrorist may not be the one whom we have in mind visualizing as someone who looks like a terrorist. It could be someone like you or me playing with our keyboards and doing something. It could be you and me carrying a knife and doing a lone wolf attack. Or it could be a big module of terrorism which is underway and which could come and unfold within the next. So I am no expert in that field, but I'm saying the risk is very prominent. It's very high, and we should always be mindful of that risk.
Thank you, Shailendra. Uh, Shailendra, we talk about two important dates, 9/11, 26/11. So, how these two dates have changed the way the corporates have started looking at terrorism as a risk or as a peril or as a crisis. So, your thoughts on that?
Sure. So when 9/11 happened, I remember, of course, I was still doing my chartered accountancy. I was still a student then, and we watched with utter bewilderment of what's happening in the US, and US was the most secure country, the strongest country, and someone getting at the heart of the financial capital by pushing a plane out there. And the world has changed after that, right? You have Iraq, which has toppled. You have Afghanistan the way it is. So things have changed. 26/11, another black day in our history. There were a lot of people working in corporates who were stuck up in Taj and people trying to get them out. And then we realized that something like this can happen even in a place like India, uh, and with such, I would say, with such high damage which happened. So I think the world has changed. We are aware of the risks. We know why people do what they do. So it's a much evolved place. It is not that it's not in my backyard, so I won't care about it. That's what US learned. Uh, Getting carried away and being too lax and paying the price is what we learned. I think both the countries have evolved over a period of time. We have learned from history, we have learned from our mistakes. Mistakes is when we learn the most. But I think it's an ongoing process, it's a continued process. And of course, it's a topic of national security. So I'm no expert, but things can return. So, for example, Taliban has returned exactly 10 years after 9/11 has happened, and the country is in their names, in their hands. I'm sorry. So, though there is no Al Qaeda now as strong as it was earlier, but it could be different shapes and sizes because the US Russia war or Cold War, which was then, has again started. US China Cold War has started. There's a threat in Taiwan, there's a threat in Ukraine. So we don't know what terrorism might take shape because India is now a very significant country. We have overpassed even UK in terms of global GDP. So we are at the number fifth position. So we have a significant say in world economy and world affairs. And just a couple of days back, we gave our view on about the Russia war, Russia-Ukraine war. Our Prime Minister gave the view. So, uh, so we don't know whom we are rubbing off. We don't know. There are F-16s which have been given to an enemy nation. So we don't know how these things will be used, misused. And of course, the world is a very different place, but I think we cannot be sleeping. Jagte Raho is the motto, not just for national security, but I think for each one of us as individuals, citizens, of whom we fall prey to, whom we interact with, either on the cyberspace, on the social media space, in the physical space, but the good thing is there's a lot of nationalist feeling in the country, and which has increased after the Pulwama attacks, etc. So I think to that extent we are alert as a nation. We have a very good national security policy and right people handling those things. And I think as corporates, we at least we need to ring fence our perimeters, which could be in terms of cyber or which could be in terms of the physical perimeters. And whom do we deal with? Whom do we send money to? So the role as money laundering becomes very critical. Anti-money laundering, may I say? Due diligence very big becomes very important. I think in this whole journey of building the Ram Setu, we are the small Gilari who can contribute a small bit to the whole thing, but we should be keep on doing it. That's my view.
Thanks, Shalin. That was really helpful. Just to add, post these two dates like 9/11, 26/11, it's not only the corporates, who have started looking terrorism altogether in a different way. It's also the reinsurers and the insurers. Like, if we take the statistics of 9/11, the total loss to the reinsurers was approximately, USD 10 billion. And when we talk about the Mumbai attacks 2008, the losses for the insurance companies and the reinsurers were close to or in excess of 500 crores. So, these two dates are very, very critical for corporates also, for insurers also, for reinsurers also, for every individual, I would like to say. So, moving forward, when we talk about buying behavior of insurance, especially, for corporates when it comes to buying a terrorism risk. So what are the key features or what are the observations? Amit, I would like you to address this question, please.
Thanks, Rajnish, and good evening to all panelists and my viewers. See, we are, living in a set of mind where we say, the insurance is not important. We do not require. Business always think of to, have a cost cutting, how we can do the cost cutting. But still, I believe, the now the corporates are coming very fast, very aggressively in sharing the risk through insurance and all. May it be fire insurance, may it be the burglary insurance, may it be theft insurance, as well as this the terrorism insurance also. But there is a I feel there was a system when 9/11 there was a time, and as you have already pointed out that 26/11 and 9/11 there is a major changes into the terms and conditions of the policies. Earlier, the insurance policy was inbuilt into in your normal policies, which after 9/11, it has been taken back by our reinsurer and all. Then the country has come up, in 2002 April, and they have started to making a pull to cover up this particular things. But still, it's a separate insurance which you have to take it. I believe the awareness, the lack of awareness is also one of the very key points where the even in corporate wants to take it, but as they are not aware that this insurance has already been withdrawn. So their behaviorals are changing now, not only because of the 9/11 and 26/11, but thereafter a lot of different incidents has happened, which like Delhi serial blast, Jaipur blast, the Assam bombing. Lot of incidences has happened in which the lot of even Indian Parliament attack. So there were a lot of things which has second the completely corporate world as a whole. And the actions, activities under the aegis of the general insurance to pull the whole backup for the terrorism insurance is also very special. And this has given back to the corporate as well as the individuals to have a confidence. As you said, after the Taj attack and all, it was almost 3,796 million they have settled they have got the loss of the 500 also. But still, its work is going on, and thereafter also in several incidences they have taken up. So I believe the awareness is very much required to the corporate. And at the same time, what benefits, how we are settling, because see, still terms of insurance is little bit having pros and cons, because what is not included, what is included, that all things with the do's and don'ts kind of things must come up to the corporates, so that as one of the panelists was saying that we are trying to have our BC, business continuity plan and all. So this particular aspects will definitely goes very high in by buying behavioral of this particular things. But last year, as the statistics shows, the different companies has done a very good business on covering the terrorism risk. Like GIC, I am saying it out, 3,336 million Indian rupees they have done it. General insurance also have done Lombard has done Bajaj Allianz 1,000. IFCO Tokyo has done 786. So it's not that they are not doing the business, but still they have a lot of scope which they can do it. Still, definitions we are reducing, that the SME and micro enterprise kind of definitions are go on changing. We have also to make them, these are entrepreneurs, to understand what is the benefits and how, because they all are operating in all geographies and all fintech companies are operating. So we have to make it awareness kind of things, which will definitely boost the buying behavior of the Indian corporates in India, and it will definitely give protections as well as the business kind of things. That's all.
Thank you, Amit. I would like to second you on that. As you mentioned, that in India especially, the corporates have a very less appetite when it comes to buying insurance. And when it comes to terrorism as an insurance or as a peril, because terrorism is not a mandatory insurance in India. It's usually comes as an add-on with the property
Add-on.
policies. Or what corporates are doing, they are taking standalone terrorism policies with certain risk exposures, both on their PD, property damage, business interruption, and a certain limit on the third party liability. So as I mentioned, there are very, very less corporates in India itself, like, who are buying terrorism up to the full limits. So just to add to that, even when we talk about insurers and reinsurers, as you mentioned prior to that 9/11, this terrorism was offered free of cost to most of the corporates because it was a part of the all risk policy itself, and it was coming free of cost. But 9/11 changed a lot of things for the insurers, reinsurers, and everybody. Thank you, Amit. That was really, really insightful. Uh, Now we talked about insurance, reinsurance. So I like to move on to Anuj. So Anuj has been dealing with the reinsurance for quite long. So Anuj, I would like to understand from you, like, what is happening in the reinsurance market to increase the penetration of, terrorism policies or terrorism buying behavior in India or across the globe. So if you can give a global picture in terms of what's happening in reinsurance markets, that will be really helpful.
Sure. Thanks, Rajnish, for the question. Right. As all the panelists are kind of alluding to 9/11, right? And we talked about terrorism being there as free. I will not call it that way. I will say, yeah, it was more implicit that it's there, it's covered. But now, once industry went through 9/11, they suffered the loss of 50 billion USD. They realized, yeah, that's not something which is a business, a model which is tenable. So they kind of started excluding terrorism as a clause, right? So they were like, uh, not really willing to insure or reinsure the terrorism as a risk, and that's the kind of turning point for the industry, and the kind of uptake which we have seen post that of the sovereign based pools being kind of formed to kind of provide the reinsurance and insurance cover for the terrorism related risk, right? And while you're talking about terrorism related risk, right, I think we have to understand why this is difficult for our insurers or reinsurers to kind of provide it, right? First, the data is being scarce, right? Though we're talking about large instances, but still, as compared to any other cat event, the data is not enough to do any good set of modeling, right? Second being, it's not being random, right? When we do a modeling, it's for a random perspective, right? It's while terrorism is more concentrated, more affecting a particular geography, right? So all those factors kind of make it very difficult for someone to model a terrorism risk and kind of price for it and offer it as a service, which is self-sustainable in itself, right? That's wherein we have these models of sovereign-based pools, right, across the globe, right? Whether starting from US, we have this TRIPRA to going to the Asian countries like Australia, we have ARPC, and then all the most of the European countries, right? Each one of them has their own uh, pools. The terms and conditions, the framework of that pool could differ in terms of what they cover for, what kind of prices they are they are being kind of baked in, what kind of layers are there, who kind of contributes what, and so forth. But in principle, the idea is to kind of share the risk between insurer, reinsurer, and the government, right? From a government perspective, obviously there is a huge risk and the liability which they kind of need to to kind of take care of. That's the reason they are into this terrorism uh, funding, or not terrorism funding, I think it's the wrong word, terrorism pools, right? Terrorism reinsurance pools. And also from the industry perspective, right, it kind of augurs well for their reputation, and it enables them to provide innovative solutions, right? So we are seeing as evolution which is happening for over last 20 years post 9/11. I think that was kind of fulcrum point for this event, that the definition of terrorism is changing. My co-panelists have been talking about cyber, means we are talking about whether it's just cyber terrorism is included, not included. Then we have now additional set of terrorism form like nuclear, biological, radiological, chemical. I think previously they were kind of excluded. Now post COVID-19 and so forth, I think lot of countries have started including them as well, right? So there's a lot of change, and it's evolving, right? As we could kind of appreciate, right? Terrorism is evolving. I think Shailendra and Abhishek talked about it, how it's means what is covered and what's not covered as part of terrorism, and so is the industry, right? So industry is also kind of evolving in terms of what we cover and how we cover. And as we say it, right, we are kind of predicting or mitigating or managing terrorism is not something which is being kind of cracked as of now. It continue to remain as a challenge, and that's where in the entire way we are evolving as a global unit. The response to it differs by geography, and it's more region based, country based, and I think over a period of time I see it we will have more global response as well when we all come together and start providing the covers.
Yeah, thanks, Anuj. Anuj, just an addendum question. Like, you mentioned about, reinsurers looking at geographies, countries when they are, designing the various structures or plans or the rates for reinsurance for the terrorism cover in respective countries. So, what is the appetite for reinsurers when it comes to Indian risk? Like, any
So
specific? Yeah.
look, I think again, if you look at India, India is different from other countries, right? In India, we don't have the sovereign based pool. The pool, the India, the M trip which we have is more the pool of the kind of other reinsurers kind of coming together and kind of sharing the risk, and obviously all when we talk about any of these pools or this consortium of players coming together, there is a cap to what appetite they have, right? And what much they wish to share. So obviously, till the time risk and rewards are not commensurate, people will have apprehension. So and that's where we start, right? Everyone is there in the business to make profit, to to get into the business, which is something which could be predictable, which they can kind of and it's not something which can make them go out of the business, right? So all that is being factored into when we have these policies, these pools being prepared, and the way we kind of structure them.
Thank you so much, Anuj. So let me
Welcome.
come back to Amit again. Amit, what do you think? The various insurance solutions for terrorism, do they have any future both in India or globally?
See, I believe it has very large future and lot of scope. I believe this risk has still not touched even the beginning. As I told you, that people are not at all, even the corporates are not at all aware of that. This particular thing has been withdrawn after 9/11, and they are not aware of what is included, what is excluded. They come to know only when they file their claims, and on then only they come to know. Here I told you the corporates means what we constitute only the corporate offices, big offices, manufacturing plant industry, or the units, big units having 2,000 5,000 crores turnover kind of things, or having a full plant machinery infrastructure. What we constitute, see, if we are constituting only this, thereafter lot of SMEs are there, small industries, SSI, small scale industries are there. Those who are also working with capital of 1 crore, 2 crore, 5 crores. So will they require these kind of things or not? This is a very big questions which nobody is touching to them, and they are more they are more interested in taking these all risk coverage. If we will make them understand, if we will make them convinced how beneficial this is for them. Not only this, the CGSATME and all our coverage is being given, but they also require this type of insurance is required to be done, because at end of the day, when they have already injured, they go for the the uh, getting the benefit out of it. Then that point of time, they know this was not included into. So I will say there is a lot of future in terms of fintech, in terms of the small farms, SSI, MSME, SME, and a biggest market that I will say that is individual. We are not at all thinking about the individuals. See, now the salaries of the individuals, those who are key managerial positions or even average salary has gone like anything. So individuals are, if you will look at the all terrorist attack which has happened in India, may it be Akshardham temple, Delhi series blast, Mumbai blast, Jaipur blast, Assam bombing. So individuals have died into it, averaging right from the 257. That is the government statistics say 257 people, 300 people, 900 people have died. This much people have injured. What about their coverage and all? So I feel it's a market is completely open. Only the the training, only the making the concerned person aware will definitely bring a very good compositions. I feel it's a future of the insurance market which will come up. And not only this, the government is also having, or you can say it's a individual
Hello, Amit. I think we lost you.
individual in this very fantastically the claim settlement they have done it. So this has given again back to the corporate as well as to the individual, their faith has been held up. We will get the money also. So to encash these all situations, and we have to make aware, make the priorities to, we have to touch to the corporate, including the small enterprises, SMEs, and as well as the individual. So a huge scope, huge market is available for the growth of the terrorism as a risk. This is what my view is.
Thanks, Amit. So, any other panelist would like to take this question, like Nimesh, Abhishek, Anuj? Anybody would like to add, Shalindra, on the future of buying insurance, especially for terrorism risk in India?
I'm in the line of insurance, though it's life insurance, not general insurance. But I think COVID has taught us that 1 in 100 year scenarios do happen. It happened in my lifetime. Uh, and if I do a crystal ball gazing, uh, there is a possibility of more black swan events happening in near future. So what we thought may not happen, where the probability was low and the impact was high, if I use an X and a Y axis, now the probability of it happening is suddenly going up. The risk of a contagion effect of something happening somewhere else in the world and its impact in some other shape and form is also increasing. So I think more is the risk, more is the probability, higher is the risk, and higher the risk, then it's simple. Uh, uh, get your insurance up. So it's as simple as that. So yeah, I think there's a lot of scope for it in future. And then specialist insurance like terrorism, event-based insurance, or insurance which could cover you for travel to particular countries for particular periods, particular people, etc. Different shapes, sizes will keep on increasing the bouquet of offerings. So I think the demand will go up, not just terrorism, but events like these. So I think it's an area to watch out for.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hi,
rightly
Nimesh
said,
here.
Shalindra.
Yeah.
Yeah, Nimesh.
Yeah. Sorry, Rajnish, please go ahead.
Yeah. So Nimesh, I was just adding to what Shalendra mentioned. Yeah, he mentioned about two things. One is frequency and one is intensity. So when we talk about terrorism, no doubt about the intensity. We all know the kind of losses that happened during the various terrorist activities. When we talk about frequency also, like what the data says is, like from 2000 to 2014, there were 62,000 instances of terrorist activity happening across the globe, which itself is a big number. So when it comes for terrorism as a risk for corporates, we see both high frequency as well as high intensity. So my view is that it has a very bright future, especially when insurance is taking up in India especially. So terrorism can see manifold growth in time to come. Yeah, Nimesh.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Rajnish, to what you said, Shailendra said, I think absolutely in sync with you guys. I think we are at a very nascent stage as far as the awareness of this subject is concerned from an insurance perspective, right? So unless the event has happened, many, very few of us would have even gone back to our cupboards and pulled out the policy and read the terms and conditions in terms of what it has to say, right? So my entire view is that uh, more and more awareness comes into play. I think more and more people will come forward to taking up these kind of policies. More and more corporates will be inclined to pick up these policies. So I think today, as far as current day is concerned, I think awareness is the key. I think together as an industry, we have a joint responsibility to create awareness in terms of what the policies cover, what it does not. And once the word of mouth spreads, the awareness starts ticking in. I think it would be a good way ahead in terms of booking more policies in this basket.
Great. Thank you everyone for giving such insightful thoughts on terrorism as a risk, the buying behavior of corporates towards terrorism risk. So we have reached towards the end of the session, and I'll look forward to Shantanu for taking the questions that we have from the audience. So over to you, Shantanu.
Hi, Rajnish. Thank you so much. It was quite interesting to hear your thoughts. Well, I have a question here. What is the difficulty of insuring against terrorism risk, acts of terrorism, which are covered under various personal insurance policies? I'm not sure if this is exactly what the question was intended to be framed, but here it is on your stage. Um, what are the difficulties of insuring against terrorism risk, acts of terrorism, which may be covered under various personal insurance policies?
Uh, so what I can understand is Mr. Rajiv is trying to ask about the difficulties that are there when we are trying to buy a terrorism policy. So, talking about the difficulties when we are trying to buy an insurance policy for terrorism, one thing is that various corporates, they have a spread across geographies in India. Now, if you pick up say XYZ corporate, first thing is the spread. They may have various locations across various states, various districts. So for an insurance company or for a reinsurer, it becomes quite difficult to give an estimation of the kind of risk exposure because of the spread that is there. Secondly, when it comes to the difficulties faced by an insurance company, it is the sum insured or the values at risk. Many a times the values are very high, which is beyond the capacity of the insurance companies, and they have to go to their reinsurance to arrange for those capacities or to GIC. So those are some of the challenges that the insurance companies or reinsurers face in providing an insurance coverage for terrorism. If I understood the question correctly, Mr. Rajiv.
Okay. Ideological terrorism disrupts business continuity, and it can be real as well as virtual. How can insurance assist in virtual risks and virtual crises?
All right. So as mentioned, the insurance can help both for virtual as well as real kind of terrorist activity. When we talk about real kind of terrorist activity, you have a physical damage to your assets, you have a business interruption, you have a party liability loss. So all those things can be covered through a terrorism policy, or in the asset policy itself, where you take terrorism as an add-on, or you take a standard terrorism policy overall. When we talk about virtual risk, so we have n number of liability policy coming in the market. We have a cyber liability policy which can help when it comes to a virtual terrorist attack or ransomware.
Uh, does insurance cover terrorism risk under personal policy? That's Munira.
Okay, so let me answer that. So when we talk about personal policy, so when you take a PA policy, personal accident policy, it is a 24/7 cover and it covers terrorism also. So your personal policies, especially the personal accident policy, it covers the risk of terrorism.
Yeah, and just to add, even for life policies, in case of death due to terrorism, even life policies would cover that.
Yeah, true.
Okay. So when the government published damages, attacks which have happened due to terrorism, only that scenario we can raise claim or settle claim. But what if in smaller attack, government does not declare or publish whether the said attack involves terrorism?
Uh, all right. So, there's a very, very fine line because when we talk about terrorism, it usually happens at a larger scale. So, government authorities will be aware of it. There will be various notifications, publications. Also, the government of India has already identified certain organizations who have been identified as a, terrorist or a terrorism organization. So even if you pick up like, a Naxalite, so, a Naxalite attack is covered under a a terrorism policy because Naxalite has been categorized as a terrorist. Now, when we are talking about small events, so as I mentioned, like, there is a very thin line. Like, it may not be a terrorist activity, it may be a malicious damage, it may be a riot, it may be a civil commotion. So, we need to understand the difference between the trigger point of the claim. So, what I would like to conclude is that when it comes to terrorism, it is usually at a larger scale and it does not go away from the radar of the government. So, that notification definitely comes, and the insurance policies pay for such losses if terrorism is opted.
Okay. All right. I believe those are all the questions we have for today. Uh, Rajnish, any parting thoughts?
Uh, So let me thank all the participants first because it is very very important to have a audience who is very very patient. I'm sure that we have been able to add value when it comes to buying a terrorism risk, when it comes to various corporates, because I'm sure various corporates who have joined this call, they would have got a thought clarity on what terrorism risk is, what are the various alternate methods available, how they can buy the policies, what kind of exposure it can bring. So as I mentioned at the start of my dialogue, that when we are talking about crisis management, again,
Right.
a crisis is something like which is unforeseen event. It's a sudden, it disrupts your business, and then it harms the corporate, your organization, the people, everybody gets affected. So when it comes to crisis, terrorism activity definitely leads to a crisis situation, and it is very very important that we manage such crisis situation which is caused by terrorism. So it is important that in the modern world we look at terrorism as a key peril when it comes to disruption of business. So that's all from
No,
my side. Let me
excellent.
also thank all the delegates because they have also been here and they have thought the various insights on the terrorism risk, what is happening globally, the history of terrorism, what the reinsurers are doing, what is the future of terrorism. So many thanks to them also for sharing their thoughts on this. Uh,
Thank you so much, Rajnish. One last, if you could just take a minute here. Do we
yeah.
have merged policy of Mediclaim and insurance?
Actually, the question is not clear to me. Like Mediclaim itself is a different policy, so it's a
Hmm.
health policy.
Right.
Yeah, so it's a kind of insurance. So I did not get the question. One question is, does insurance cover terrorism risk under personal policy? Yes, so that is already answered. Yeah.
That yes, that we've picked, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, so on that note, thank you so much, Rajnish. You've been tremendous to take out the most from this panel. I'm sure it was very insightful for all the attendees. I'd like to thank Amit, Shailendra, Abhishek, Anuj, and Nimesh for joining us as speakers for today's session. Also, Mahindra Insurance Brokers Limited has been instrumental in the work that we've done in the past, and I hope they continue to give us opportunities to put forward some engagements like these in the future. Please note that the company provides direct insurance broking for corporate and retail customers and has a wide range of products for the non-life and life segments. Rajnish, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure working with you on today's
Thank you,
session.
Shantanu. Thank you, everyone. Take care. Stay
Thank
safe.
you so much.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thank you
Namaste.
so much. Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Insightful session.
Thank
Thank you so
you.
much.